All right, rock stars, welcome to another No Bullshit podcast for contractors. This is a three-part series. Last part that we talked about was break-even margin. You definitely want to get your hands on that podcast because that's going to give you clarity of what you got to make sure you consider when pricing your jobs. Today, we're talking about an issue that I hear about all the time, heard about it from a recent client of ours, John, where I asked him to show me how he quotes jobs. And after he showed me that, his mathematical equation, it was so wrong. Turns out he lost literally over the last few years within hundreds of thousands of dollars in not applying this. So we're going to be talking about what's called markup and margin, the differences between the two. It's a carry on from the last podcast. So let's get you to prevent the same mistakes that John made. And let's get the profits into your pocket versus out to the public, out to the world. Okay. So that's what we're going to be talking about today with another No Bullshit podcast. Talk to you soon. Until right now, this very moment, contractors have always been on their own, not as tradespeople, but being alone and knowing how to take their business to the next level. They call us working class. They call us blue collar. They say that we don't have the smarts to become the business owner that we're meant to be. That is such bullshit. You have the ability. You're more than any of that. The question really is, where do you get the insights that you need specific to contracting to systemize your business so you can get your profits to pay for your freedom? I'm Andrew Houston. I'm going to show you how to make more profits, how to get more control, how to get more freedom in the simplest, quickest way possible without any of that bullshit. Welcome to the No Bullshit podcast for contractors. Listen up, level up, and if you learn something, like the video, subscribe to the channel, change your business, change your life. All right, rock stars, welcome back to another No Bullshit podcast for contractors. We're going to be talking about how to use the right equation when you are quoting your jobs. In the last podcast, we talked about break-even margin. Go back to that if you haven't, because you want to determine what your break-even margin is. We're going to be referencing it on today's call. Yes, we're going to be talking about math. Okay. Yes, we're going to be talking about some equations, but listen, you want to become a champion CEO, you want to become a great business owner, you got to know the basics. And this is basic math. I'm not trying to be a mathematician. I'm not trying to, say that you need to know every aspect of this, as far as theory, but you definitely got to make sure you're applying the right formula in the right way. If you don't do that, just the difference between division and multiplication, I mean, we all know that. If you don't use this properly, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to show to you, I'm going to prove to you that you're at risk at losing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Potentially, you've already lost it, but let's stop the bleeding. Let's make sure that you're using this formula properly. I don't care what kind of contractor you are. I don't care where you are in the world. I don't care how big or how small you are. You got to apply this, okay? And this is going to lead us to the next conversation. And how do you adjust for budgets and adjust for some of these big changes that are happening in the industry, in the world, as far as costs and things of that nature. But today we're going to be talking about margin versus markup. I'm going to give you guys an example. We'll walk you through it step by step. You're at the right place in this podcast if you want to become more profitable. Okay. If you want to become more confident in your pricing, if you want to make sure that every job that you price, you're pricing profitably, then this is the right podcast for you. If you're not a contractor, you probably shouldn't be listening to this. If you are a contractor and that isn't important to you, pricing your jobs profitably, then you probably should get the hell off the podcast. Okay. I mean, seriously, because your time is going to be maybe used more valuable someplace else. So again, I'm Andrew Houston for Profit for Contractors. I'm so passionate about helping you guys become more profitable. And this is one of the hundreds and hundreds of ways to do that. And you know what? In saying that, I want to let you know there's so many ways for you to improve your profitability that if you just apply some of these strategies, it's going to make a massive difference in your business. Okay, so let's get into this. One of the greatest problems people have, okay, is as contractors, we don't get shown how to do these, how to use math properly. In a lot of cases, we don't get shown, like in the previous podcast, how to determine what our break-even margin is or even what it means, right? So today, we're going to talk about how you can take what we cover off in the previous podcast around break-even margin and how we can make sure we use that to quote our jobs profitably, okay? and what formula do we need to use, and what, and how do we got to go about using it, and what the consequences can be if you don't apply it properly. Okay. So again, I can't stress enough. Um, I'm going to be going through this step by step. We're not trying to become mathematicians here. I'm not a mathematician. I'm just going to break it down for you as simple as I can. Okay. So we got margin over on this side, markup over here. All right. Margin is a relationship of profit and price. Okay. Markup is a relationship of cost versus price. So understand there's a difference here. One is a relationship of profit and price. The other one is a relationship of cost versus price. Okay. You could use either one of these formulas. Okay. But I'm going to suggest to you, this is just my personal opinion. Okay. I'm going to suggest that you use margin. All right. And the reason that I want you to think about margin is because it is directly used with your accountants, with your bookkeepers, right? When you're looking at your financials, okay, margin is what's used. Okay. When we're looking at our gross profit margin, it's margin. It's not gross profit markup. It's gross profit margin. When we're looking at our net profit margin, it's net profit margin. Okay. It's not net profit markup. So for ease of understanding, I'm highly suggesting, again, you can go and do markup if you want, apply that. That's not what I'm going to be covering in depth today. I'm going to be focusing on how do we use our break even margin from the previous podcast to determine, what formula to use so that we apply the right margin, get the right margin, and be consistent with being profitable. Okay. So that's why I'm focusing on margin. Okay. Because it's used a lot more frequently. It's referenced more frequently. And you could almost compare these two, like, to be honest with you, one could be inches, one could be feet. Okay. So I, maybe that's the right comparison, maybe not, but it's one is different than the other. Okay. And but they can both be used in your business. But today we're going to focus in on margin. Okay. So here's an example, right? So you notice that margin, okay, is cost divided by 1 minus margin, okay? Whereas markup is cost multiplied by 1 plus markup, all right? To get you your price, okay? Notice one is division and the other one is multiplication. This is where a lot of contractors go wrong, okay? So here's the example, okay? We got a job. It's going to cost us in labor and material $1,000, all right? In our previous conversation, we talked about what our break-even margin was. Okay. In the previous conversation, we talked about a break-even margin. Just as an example, this isn't going to be your break-even margin because break-even margin is different for every single business because their fixed expenses are different, their sales are different. You can go back to the previous podcast to understand that better. But we came up with a 25% break-even margin. We got to put 25% on every job that we do to cover for those expenses. Okay. So if we got $1,000 job, right? We gotta take into account 25% in order for us to make sure that we're covering our overhead expenses, our heat, our hydro, our lease for our vehicles, the rent of the building, whether or not we get sales or not. Okay, so 25%. Then we want to make an extra 20%. This is just for this example. So what do we got to do? Well, we have to put the two together so that we have a total of how much markup do we want to put on this job. So 25% break even margin. Okay. We want to make 20% margin. The total margin we have to use is 45%. So here's where a lot of people go wrong. Well, the first place that they go wrong is they don't even know what break even margin is and they don't apply it. So they go and they put on 20%. Okay. Versus the 45%. And so right out of the gate, if that was the case, if their break-even margin was 25%, just think about this for a second. And you only put on 20%, the 20% wouldn't even cover your overhead expenses. It wouldn't even cover for you to keep the lights on. Okay. So this is really the first place that people screw up. And I discussed that on the previous podcast. Okay. But if you miss out on this here, guys, you know that this might be a problem for you in not using break even. If you look at the end of the month and you go, where's all my money? Okay. If you look at the end of the month and you go, I did all these sales, or even my sales increased, and I've got less in my freaking bank account than I started with. one of the factors that could be, causing that problem is you're not considering your break even margin. Okay. So the more and more sales you do, the more and more, you're not covering those overhead expenses. Okay. So make sure you figure out your break even margin. So in this case, we figured out it to be 25%. We want to make 20%. The margin we're going to use, okay, is 45%. Okay. So how do we apply this 45%? Well, a lot of people, they'll take the $1,000, right? And they'll apply it to this right here. And they'll go 1,000 times 1.45. This should actually be, hey, we all make mistakes, right? Okay. This should be, cross that baby out. This should be $1,450. Okay, pretty simple. I could have reshot this podcast, but I'm not, because guess what? I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Um, and I think it's good just to be real about that. Okay, so it was 1,000 times 1.45. Okay, that's what a lot of contractors would do. They'd go, okay, 45%. I'm just going to multiply that by 1.45. That gives me 1,450. Well, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that we are trying to use margin, not markup. Notice markup is using multiplication. We need to use division. Okay. We need to use the formula of cost, the $1,000, divided by 1 minus margin. So 1 minus 0.45 is really 1,000 divided by 0.55, which gives us $1,818. Guys, look at the difference. Okay. Let me just figure this out right now. 1,800 minus 1,450. Guys, it's a difference of $368. Okay. $368 on this job. Okay. That you missed out on. Okay. Because you didn't use the formula properly. Because you used a markup formula for a margin, that we're trying to get. Okay. So you've got to use this formula properly. Okay. So you take your cost, I'll just say it again, divided by 1 minus 0.45, right? This is our point, our 45% is really 1,000 divided by 0.55, which gives us $1,818. Guys, you think about this. It's big deal, Andrew. It's only $368. Guys, that's $368 that we missed out on in quoting profitably on just $1,000 job. So think about this. Let's say that we do $10,000 worth of work as far as, labor and expenses. Okay. Guys, we would be out, $3,680. Let's say that we do $1 million worth of work. We'd be out $368,000, right? Like, if you don't use the right formulas in the right way, you're going to be blinded by not knowing where your money is going, and you're going to be blinded by not knowing for sure that you're quoting your jobs profitably. So you've got to use these formulas, right? Okay. Write this down. Okay. Next time you do a job, you take your cost, your labor, and your material, and you divide it by the margin that you want to make. And make sure when you're looking at your margin, you're taking into account your break even margin, the margin that you want to make on the job. Okay. So that's what I wanted to cover off with you guys today. The next podcast, part 3 of this 3-part series, we are going to talk about, how you can use this when your expenses, especially in today's times, right? In the economy today, look at the cost of things going up. If you're not adjusting your pricing, and let alone using the formulas properly, let alone knowing what your break-even margin is, and adjusting for that, well, then guess what? You're the one that's paying for all this increase in pricing. You're not passing it on to your clients, right? You're not being the business owner you're meant to be, because you're the one that's having to absorb all those costs. So, guys, we have to constantly use these formulas. We also have to constantly, which we're going to talk about in the next podcast, is adjust. Okay, continuously adjust for profitability. Okay, depending upon the situation we're in. So, just recapping this, make sure you use the right formula. I'm highly suggesting you use margin, not markup, because margin, as I said before, margin is the language used when you're looking at your financials. Margin is the language used when you're talking to your accountant, to your bookkeeper. When you're talking to us at Prof for Contractors, we're focusing in on margin. Okay. Again, if you are using it this way, then make sure that you're using it, the right way with the right data, with the right approach. But I'm highly suggesting you use it margin, and that's basically it. So look, you can do this. It's simple math, all right? And it's also about creating habits. We've got this price for profits calculator. It has all this in here. It's explained to you guys. It breaks it down step by step by step. It goes through what I just covered off, and it allows you to have a document that you can share with your team. Maybe you have other people pricing jobs and what have you. You've got to be consistent with that, but start with yourself. Make sure that you've got it right. And this is Andrew Houston from Profit for Contractors. I'll see you on the flip side. Hey, rock stars. Thank you for watching the No Bullshit Podcast for Contractors. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button. And if you're serious about growing and need help, click on the link below. Myself and my team would love to help and give you the necessary tools so you can take your contracting business to the next level. And remember, dominate, delegate, and deliver.